Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of the talking heads that supposedly rule or govern us. Now, the globalists have been gradually increasing their control of the entire Western political system, quite successfully, by the way. So now in the Western world, there's not a single president or prime minister or senior ministers who aren't completely controlled by the globalists. And increasingly, they're just talking heads, they're information deliverers. They get wheeled out by the globalists to tell us about how white supremacy and the far right and Nazis are everywhere. That's their only real job now, and to push, to aid and abet the pushing of policies and so on that create social division and make the country, ungovernable in terms of one cohesive unit. So they only have they're employers. They are employed by and directed by and instructed by the globalists and the World Economic Forum goons and so on. Now, this idea, when we talk about, the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, their policies failed. Biden couldn't make a decision. The only decision Biden gets to make is what flavor ice cream he has for dinner. That's it. Or for he doesn't get to make any other decision. Everything is made for the speeches that he has, that he's given, the crap he reads off the teleprompter. He doesn't even know what he's saying half the time, or even where he is for that matter. Now, his cognitive decline was already obvious and manifest in 2020, but because the globalists control the entire media establishment, and they all also control the vote counting and subverting various voting laws in key states, I think they were able to drag Biden across the line, within my estimation, somewhere between 20 and 22 million manufactured votes. And the only reason they're against Trump is because they can't control him. And he's not a globalist flunky, which was why the mass immigration went hysterical as soon as they installed Biden, the globalists installed Biden, because they'd had the last 4 years, they had a budget of how many illegals they wanted to bring in, and they were behind on those numbers, and so they had to gin it up and ramp it up real quick to make up for the lost time. If anything, you can look at the globalists. They've certainly got a very bureaucratic bent about them. They've got their budget. We have to bring in 1 million illegals a year into the US. That's their budget, and if they fall behind, they've got to make it up. So that they're really, there's a lot of bureaucrats in there driving the on the ground stuff there for the globalists. It's got sort of angry, disgruntled bureaucrat written all over it, the globalist behavior and attitudes. Nonetheless, let's come back to this idea of the talking head. Now, it wasn't always this way. Not all politicians used to be puppets, talking head puppets controlled by external forces. This is a relatively new phenomenon. When we talk about the revolution that the globalists have imposed on us, this is one of the very key central parts of it, that they've taken over the bodies politic all across the Western world, and that every alleged political leader is not a leader at all. They're just a little talking head flunky stooge that's stuck out front to give us give the populace the idea that we're being led and there's somebody there we voted for that makes the decisions. Nothing could be further from the truth, of course. The globalists make all the decisions now. Every Western country has its budget of mass immigration and illegals it's meant to take in, and that is allocated from the central globalist secretariat, and each country, the supposed leaders that we supposedly vote for, leader is given their budget. This year you will take in 500,000. That is your budget. Stick to it or else. And given that the globalists also control international finance, and every Western country is running massive financial deficits, fiscal deficits in every imaginable way, then any government that steps out of line, or any prime minister that thinks, or president that thinks they're in charge, is going to be just removed, as they have in the United Kingdom against the once great British Empire. just having its prime ministers removed at will by the globalists. No, we want no, you're gone, you're out. That's it. Don't care if the people voted for you. No, you're out. And this is this is how it is now. So every president or prime minister is reduced to the status of some sort of flunky school kid. I remember, I got the job one day at school, I don't know, third year high school or something, where they once every 6 months you had they'd put your name on a list, and you'd have to run around to the classrooms delivering messages. The principal wants to see you when the lesson ends, or any message. Just you're a message deliverer, and that's all you were. And sometimes the deputy principal will give you a minute. I want you to go to class number 99 and say to Miss Smith that so and so and so and so and so and so. Have you got that? Okay, repeat it to me. All right, that's what. And then you go off, and that's what the Western supposed political leaders and politicians are reduced to now. They're just little flunky little school kid messengers that are. So Biden gets that, and the biggest threat we have is white supremacists, Nazis, and oh yeah, sure we do. That's the speech being given to him. And this is if you look at the British Prime Minister, if you look at the German Chancellor and all this. Well, what are they all saying? Oh, the big threat is white supremacists, Nazis, and they're all saying the exact same thing. And so we know that this is centrally scripted by the globalist secretariat. But again, it wasn't always that way. One of the things about, or one of the indicators that a political leader is actually a leader is, do they write their own speeches? Do they make policy decisions? And well, I don't mean implementation decisions, because the globalists can say, well, you bring in 500,000 people this year, mass migrant, black peasants and so on. How you do it's up to you, but that's what the outcome you have to achieve. So I don't mean that. I mean original policy heavy lifting. So Winston Churchill used to write his own speeches, for example. So did Harold Macmillan. And the British Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. So did some of the Labor leaders. And you're starting to see by the late 60s that increasingly policy decisions and speeches are being written by professional speechwriters, and the policy heavy lifting is less and less of it's being done by the political party or the political leaders. That doesn't mean they can't outsource it sometimes to think tanks or people who are expert in a particular field. But when you're handing it over to ideological people, ideological fanatics who are not expert in any field, then you can see the drift and the degradation process, or the process of degradation and subversion going on. Now, take someone like John Kennedy, assassinated President John Kennedy. He had a couple of speechwriters, and I'm thinking one of them now, I think Ted Sorensen was his name. And he wrote some of the great speeches of the era. And Kennedy would spend quite a bit of time sort of in front of the mirror, in front of the camera, with image advisors, telling him how to deliver. Okay, let's go over that again. This is when he was a senator. Let's go over this again, Senator. He's running for president. No, can you just hold your head this way? Okay, let's look back over this recording of your speech. Notice how you were dipping your head here. Can you just raise a little? Can you just turn a little bit that way? That's right. Now, what do you think of the suit here, Jane? What do you think the red tie or the blue tie? The blue tie, you think? Okay, with the white shirt so every facet of their image and their presentation and so on. They're rehearsing the speech, a million times, as long as it took to get the outcome and to get the emphasis. Which word? Now, when you say the word economy, Senator, can you just say it like this, just to emphasise that, because focus groups have said that this is one of the and on like that. So it's an artificial creation, and Kennedy was certainly one of those image structure. And bear in mind, television was still relatively new. If you look at, say, the debate between Kennedy and Richard Nixon leading up to that presidential election in 1960, Kennedy looked impressive. He looked confident. He looked in control. He looked like he knew what he was doing. The bottom line was, though, that Nixon had a far superior grasp of policy at every level, but he wasn't sort of a media creature. His presentation was not of the standard of Kennedy. Kennedy had everything written out for him. There's very little Kennedy actually understood of what he was saying, but it was well rehearsed and he delivered it very well. Nixon wrote nearly all his own stuff and continued to write his own speeches during his presidency. And so he was a guy who did the policy heavy lifting. He thought through the policy. He understood what the ramifications of it. And as much as the political left and even the deep state machine didn't like Nixon, he was a guy who actually could get into the weeds of policy and make decisions and determinations, and again write his own speeches. I would suspect he was the last president that, other than Trump, that ever wrote his own speeches or had a significant hand in writing them. Now, you go back further in time to presidents like Woodrow Wilson and even FDR to some, not that he didn't have speechwriters, he did. And not that Winston Churchill didn't have speechwriters, he did. There'd be times, the major speeches he would write where he would spend time crafting and going over it and editing and rewriting and that sort of thing. But if he was going to a quick meeting where he's required to give a 30-second speech, he would just go, one of his staffers, look, I need a 30-second speech about such and such or so and so. Can you knock one up? Not that Churchill wouldn't edit it and so on. So, but today that's unheard of. I doubt you could find a single politician that would make a speech. That they possibly would put something together where the globalists said, look, here's the talking points, here's what you have to cover, here's what you have to say, and they would add a few filler words into maybe that, but otherwise no. Every Western politician now is it's required and they are obligated to deliver the speech as the globalists would approve it. And every political party and every government, Western government, has the globalist controllers and commissars installed to make sure that these people stick to the script and stick to the policies and make sure that their budget for mass migrant illiterate peasants is adhered to and stuck to with absolute rigid determination and so on. Now, this again, even in my lifetime, and in fact my adult lifetime, I knew somebody who had a lot of contacts in the federal government, and they introduced me to an advisor to one of the senior politicians. And the quality of the advice, this guy was, now I was a much younger person, by the way, I'm more easily impressed, but this guy I met was, and he introduced me to others who they were the policy advisors, and they struck me as some really smart people who really knew their stuff. They weren't ideological. They would think through the issues as they were. So they were dealing with reality rather than, doctrinaire ideological fanatics. They would deal with the issues. And I thought some of them were quite impressive. Not all, but some of them were quite impressive. And I came away thinking, oh well, our government is in good hands. There are a lot of really smart people, politicians included, by the way. And some of these advisors mentioned things to me. Oh well, he writes some of his own speeches. Sometimes we hand the speech to him and he rewrites the whole thing, and so on. So you still had politicians that were determining policy, thinking through the policy, doing that heavy lifting. They would directly go to various community groups and talk about things and make notes and come back, then discuss it with advisors. So there was a real policy development type process going on. And again, some smart people doing the advising. This is before they went out to talk to think tanks or anything like that. So I came away again thinking the government was in really good hands. Again, stressing I was much younger then. Now, some years later, a politician has asked me to, or an advisor to a politician has asked me to write a few speeches for the, and this is speeches to read out in the Parliament. And so I dutifully went down and wrote the speeches and did the hard work. And the advisors around the politics, there wasn't one advisor that this guy was not in government, so there was not one advisor who I thought was who came across as being worth a pinch of shit. I was quite taken aback, and I thought, well, why don't you get better quality people? I mean, these people don't know anything. There was a youngish woman on staff, and her only objective was to go to all the embassy parties in the capital. This was because all these pollies get invited to embassy parties, was to go to embassy parties and try and score a rich Arab oil sheikh as a husband or something. That was her only. That's all she talked about. I mean, and she was an idiot as well. So and those were the sort of people surrounding. There was another political party that held the balance of power, and so you could say they were pretty much in de facto government. And I had a meeting, or not a meeting. I was sort of, talking to them, and they were just a bunch of 5-year-old kids, school kids. They were not only stupid, moronic, but they were just ridiculous feminist, ideological fanatics. And so, and I came away thinking, their hope. I mean, how do these people even get into power? I met some of the politicians who, again, it was impossible for them to even conceive of writing a speech or thinking through policy. They were just too stupid to do it. And so just in the space of 20 years or so, the quality of advisor and politician had gone through the floor. But of course, this was the time when the globalists were taking control, and the political party machinery was simply installing talking heads and flunkies and hangers-on and stooges and so on. And that really there was effectively a sign on every political party's door. If you've got an IQ above 100, don't bother. We don't want you. So and that sort of fed. So in today you get things like AOC in the United States Congress, and David Lammy and Diane Abbott and so on in the UK Parliament, and it's a crazy situation. Now, I also met then some advisors on one of the most senior government positions. So this guy. I realised that this guy, even though he held a very senior position, it was quite obvious he wasn't making any decisions. He wasn't a decision maker. He was, he was control. I mean, he had some lower level stuff he could do, but the key, the headline decisions were all made by the globalists, and that was quite apparent even then, and that was some years ago. And so and he was a talking head, and he came out to make a speech in Australia, and so I was listening to the speech, and I look back now, and every point he made and everything he emphasised was straight out of the globalist playbook. There was nothing there. He didn't think anything of that. He didn't write that speech. He didn't do the heavy lifting in any of that policy. It was all globalist determined, and so he was reading out a speech written for him by the globalist secretariat. And because they're not making any decisions, the advisors or so-called advisors he had around him were just, he had some 22, 23-year-old chick who never actually had a job. And she was only there because she was the daughter of some major political donor or something like that. So it was part of the wider patronage system, which no matter how much the globalists got involved, the patronage system remained. They just substituted higher quality people for lower quality people. So this is so when you see Biden or any of these people making a speech, or none of these people are actually making decisions. So Donald Trump, and we can only wish and pray and hope that he gets into the White House, will be the first which is why they're trying to stop him so desperately. The first politician to actually be an independent politician. He will actually make decisions. Now, how much power does a politician actually have in the overall scheme of things? You know, going back to the time that Harry Truman became president of the United States and the death of FDR, he thought, well, as president, I've got all this power and authority, so I can say, do this, do that, do so and so. And he said, so I was issuing all these orders and directives, and he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he found nothing happened. Nobody did anything. So he could issue all these orders, but if they didn't want to do it, they'd slow walk it, they'd foot drag it, and so on. So Truman was, again, I'm paraphrasing these parts here, but the advisors would come to him and say, we've got option A, B, or C. Now, they've selected those options. And Truman would, well, what about, this and that? Oh, no, they won't work. No, just these are the, and each one of those were policies that they decided on. And so they said, well, you as president can pick. And it's strawberry ice cream, chocolate ice cream, vanilla ice cream. That's it. And they'd effectively not let Truman get outside of their range of advisories. So he would say, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. I'm president and I want to do that. I mean, he's elected by the people. He's the fucking president. Well, of course he should be able to make policy determinations and so on. But he found that if he made a decision or wanted to do things that they didn't approve of, they would just slow walk it and foot drag it and invent all these reasons why it couldn't happen quickly. And he would shout and holler and scream and bang his fist on the desk and demand that something happened. But it didn't make any difference. He thought, unless you change all the key people in the bureaucracy, the top management and even the upper level of the middle management, unless you do that, you're not going to get your program through. And which is hopefully something that this time around President Trump realizes, because he got saddled with a lot of swamp creatures on his first administration, which meant he kind of couldn't get a whole lot done. So he had them foot dragging and slow walking, and then also the courts, the activist courts trying to stymie things and so on. Now I can speak to some extent from, or to a large extent, from personal experience. And just digressing, just one more moment. Liz Truss, when she was talking about her career in politics, or her time in politics, and she said that when she was just a committee member and a backbencher in Parliament with no ministerial authority, she said that as just a committee member or even a chairperson of the committee, it was very difficult to get anything done. And so you'd see what needed to be done, but you couldn't get it done because you simply didn't have the authority. Then when she became a junior minister, she thought, well, that's that. Now I've got authority, now I can do things. But she found that actually being a junior minister also didn't kind of mean a whole lot. You still couldn't really do that much. And so as much authority you thought you had, you didn't really have it. And there were a million ways they could neutralize you if you did try to do something. Then she became a senior minister and she thought, well, now I've got the authority, now I can do something. But again, she found that it wasn't really the case. The authority she thought she would have and the power she thought she'd have as a senior minister to get things done, even things that weren't necessarily big or controversial. But she would, for example, she would say, well, we need to do A and B, and nobody would be in disagreement necessarily, but in a subterranean sense, the people behind the curtain sort of watching from afar and people in the shadows peering around the corners, they didn't want that to happen. So when she moved to make it happen, they would go to the other people in the government who say someone had to sign off on the funding, or someone had to sign off on the allocation of the people, or someone else had to sign off on whatever. And so they would make sure that those people would refuse to sign off on things. So they know how to roadblock and neutralize you. And so she found as a senior minister, she actually had no authority. And then as prime minister, where you think you would actually have some authority, the second the globalists decided they didn't want her around, she was gone. So again, you have no real authority. Now, as a young sort of guy starting out in business, I thought the departmental manager was powerful, and they could do things, they could make decisions, but really their only decision making authority was to say no. They didn't really have the decision making authority to actually do something. And so there's two different types of authority. You can just say no to everybody that comes along, and that typically is going to work. As in, deciding in the negative is something your boss is probably going to back you on most of the time. But deciding in the positive, yeah, let's do that, then that might be a threat to somebody. Somebody may not like it. You may think, well, hey, you're getting too big for your boots there, buddy. That's my prerogative to make that decision. So I'm gonna fuck you up. So as a junior manager or a departmental manager, when I became a departmental manager, section manager, I realized that actually you don't have any authority. It appeared to be that way because when I go and talk to the department manager as a young trainee and so on, it seemed that he's in charge, he knows what's going on. And those were days when people were getting promoted, primarily, not always, didn't work perfectly. Primarily, people were getting promoted on merit. So the chances are that this is someone who had achieved something in their own right. Then when I got to be like a more senior manager, and then the general manager, and then the VP, and so again, the position seemed to have a lot of power as I looked at it from below. But when you actually get into the chair, you realise there's a lot of people you have to keep happy, quite as well as your boss and so on. But there are other interest groups, if you like, that are quite powerful, that can neutralise you if they mobilise and if they've got a mind to do it. So, and the energy you spend fighting these people is it just makes your life sort of rather miserable in a lot of ways. But it means that you can't get the things done that need to get done because you're too busy fighting these people that are trying to slow you down or slow walk you or even completely neutralise what you're attempting to do. And you can be attempting to do some worthwhile things. There was a company where I was EVP, and there was this terrible abuse of expense accounts. But because so many people were so heavily invested in it and their lifestyles were primarily dependent on abusing their expense accounts, when I moved to clean up the abuse, I found that I was fighting pitched battles everywhere because so many people were putting thousands of dollars every month into their pocket by abusing the expense accounts. So by trying to stop it or slow it down or eradicate it altogether, it's pitched battles in every front, and I spent all my day fighting all my time for months fighting those battles, and even trying to broker the difference. Say, look, okay, you got away with it. You've got away with it before. Promise no prosecutions. The police fraud squad might be called in. You got away with it. Fine. Let's start a new slate as from today. And no, even that wasn't acceptable. Then I tried to broker a deal by saying, all right, then we'll look, for the next month, you can continue the abuse, but then the month after that, it all has to stop. No. We want full powers to abuse our expense accounts for as long as the fuck we want to. And, you can get out of the way, you damn asshole. I mean, it's equivalent of people talking today about let's, stop mass migration. Get out of the way, you bigot. We're not going to, again. So I found there were these pitched battles. So you think as an EVP that you would have, real authority to do things. It's a private company, ostensibly a profit motive, but actually you don't. No, that's not right. You do have authority. You can do things, but you have to be prepared to fight those and stare them down who aren't going to go along with it, and who are committing terrible crimes, but you don't want to who don't want to give up those things because it suits them. And those abuses, for example, or abuses of that ilk, are all across government. So the perception of power and the perception of what you can do with power, how much of it you really have, and how much of it you can practically apply, are of course all different issues. But I do want to sort of highlight how it wasn't that long ago, and in my lifetime, where not all, but many politicians were having serious input into policy. They were writing their own speeches. They were making decisions. They were appointing quality people who knew what they were doing and could give quality advice. All that's changed. The globalists now control everything, and you don't need quality people giving you advice anymore because you can't make any decisions. Everything is decided for you by the globalist cabal, and you just do what the fuck you're told. And that's where we're at today. And the only way, which by the way is tantamount to destroying the rule of law, the due legal process, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they don't exist anymore. Things are controlled by the globalists. All the head of power is all outside of the Parliament and the Congress and so on, and resides with, again, the World Economic Forum, stooges and goons. They make decisions, they pull the strings, they issue the orders, they write the speeches, hand them to the politicians to read out in the teleprompter. You know, I didn't realize just how many idiot talking heads there are out there. There used to be a guy and this Chinese chick that were always on TV, and they were touted by the entire media class as the financial, you know, these were the financial experts. These were the people that understood and knew what was happening in the world of you know, share markets and bonds and interest rates and, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, macro government, micro government economic. But these are people that knew. And so I was at a function one day, and they were both there. And I thought, wow, here's my big chance to you know, talk to the experts. These people know it all. I mean, wow, I don't know shit compared to these people. So I spoke to the guy first, and I realized that not only did he know nothing about finance or economics or anything like that, he knew nothing. I don't think the guy could even count to fucking 10. That he knew nothing about. He's also an absolute idiot, a moron. All he was a talking head. They focus grouped him, and he came across well to the focus groups. They liked him. He sort of seemed like a relatable guy. And so they dressed him up in a suit. They would spend all day, you know, they would decide on what they were going to say at the night. It's just like the international financial cabals. They would decide what they were going to say in the evening news, and they would sit this guy down and coach him all day. You know, he had a teleprompter to read from. They would coach him all day, dress him up in the sharp suit, make sure his haircut was the right sort of thing. And that was it. He was just a talking head who knew nothing. And that's the preferred option. You don't want someone who can think for themselves. You don't want someone who's got the brain power to realize the insanity of what's going on. You want an idiot, just like Biden and, you know, Kamala Harris. You want an idiot to do this. And so this guy was, and the Chinese chick was the same. She didn't know shit. Again, she couldn't count to 10. She was just a talking head idiot that they put out front. And that's really where we're at today in pretty much every area of information delivery. A controlled, moronic talking head is just spouting propaganda at us. You've been with Tastus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.